Okay, so you want to buy a private island, no neighbors, no shared walls, no property line disputes, just you, the water, and a piece of land nobody else gets to set foot on without your permission. That's the picture in your head. Here's the part nobody tells you. The island itself is usually the cheapest thing you're going to buy right now. Today, there's a quarter-acre island in Lake Nicaragua listed for $74,000, less than a Honda Civic. You could technically become an island owner by the end of the month for less than most people spend on a used car. So why doesn't everyone do it? Because the sale price on a private island isn't the price, it's the entry fee. And the bill that shows up after you sign is where this dream usually falls apart. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why a $75,000 island can end up costing you $500,000 before you've spent a single night on it. Why the most famous private island on Earth has been destroyed by nature twice and rebuilt twice, and why almost nobody who owns one of these things ever makes the money back, except for the small handful of people who stopped keeping it for themselves and started renting it to strangers. Let's start with what you're actually buying, because private island isn't one product. Private islands come in 3 sizes, and they're 3 completely different businesses wearing the same name. At the bottom of the market sits raw, undeveloped land surrounded by water. These list for $25,000 to $1 million, mostly out of Nicaragua, Panama, Belize, and the cold water lakes of Nova Scotia. What you actually get is dirt, trees, and a boundary line. No power, no fresh water, no dock. Sometimes not even a fully confirmed legal title. In parts of the Bahamas and the Pacific, ownership records are incomplete enough that your first call has to be a lawyer, not a real estate agent. One step up is the developed private estate, running anywhere from $1 million into the tens of millions. This is Necker Island territory. A main house, staff quarters, a working dock, solar power, and enough real infrastructure that a wealthy family could genuinely live there full-time. And at the very top, you're no longer buying an island. You're buying a company that happens to be surrounded by ocean. In 2012, Larry Ellison, the co-founder of Oracle, bought 98% of the Hawaiian island of Lanai, 90,000 acres, 2 Four Seasons resorts, the only grocery store, the only gas station, a town of 3,200 people who now, more or less, work for him. Price, $300 million. The previous owner had been asking for $1 billion. Even at that scale, an island is still just an asset. The right buyer can talk down. If Lanai sounds like an outlier, it isn't. Not really. Florida's Pumpkin Key, a 26-acre island in the Keys with a dozen ready-to-build waterfront lots and tennis courts that double as a private helipad, sold for $95 million. Near Phuket, Thailand, a fully serviced 44-hectare island called Koh Rang Yai is listed at $160 million. At this altitude of the market, the island itself isn't really the product anymore. The product is exclusivity, priced by the acre. Now we get to the question that actually matters. Where does the money come from? For almost everyone who buys one of these, the honest answer is it doesn't. A private island isn't an investment. It isn't a business. It's the most expensive hobby a human being can own. A very large, very wet version of a boat that never leaves the dock, and the purchase price is only step 1. Real estate data on the private island market puts the true all-in cost, closing costs, solar power, a desalination system to turn seawater into something you can drink, a dock, a modest home, a septic system at roughly 1.8 times the sale price. A $2 million island doesn't cost $2 million to actually live on. It costs closer to $3.6 million. That $74,000 island in Nicaragua is realistically closer to $130,000 once it can support a human being. Here's why that multiplier is so brutal. Construction on an island runs 1.5 to 3 times more than the identical project on the mainland, and it has almost nothing to do with the materials themselves. Imagine building a house where every board, every bag of cement, and every generator has to be loaded onto a barge, shipped across open water, and unloaded by hand, because there's no truck route to a piece of land surrounded by ocean. The remoteness that makes an island feel private is the exact same remoteness that makes it expensive. You're not paying more for a nicer version of the same house. You're paying a shipping surcharge on your entire life. Once it can support you, the yearly bills start: property tax $5,000 to $50,000, insurance $10,000 to $50,000, and that number climbs fast the moment you're anywhere near a hurricane belt, sometimes running 2 to 3 times higher than the identical policy on a cold water island in Nova Scotia, because you're insuring a house that a Category 5 storm gets a full season to aim at. Routine maintenance $30,000 to $100,000 a year, because salt air corrodes metal, wood, and wiring at roughly twice the rate it would on the mainland. A full-time caretaker $24,000 to $60,000. Boat transport for you, your guests, and your groceries, another $10,000 to $30,000. Add it up, and a modest, already developed island costs somewhere between $84,000 and $310,000 a year just to exist before you've spent a single night there yourself. So who's actually buying these? A surprising number are celebrities looking for the one kind of privacy money can't otherwise buy. Johnny Depp, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Mel Gibson have all owned Caribbean islands at various points, usually quietly. A smaller group are investors betting that a stretch of undeveloped coastline near a growing tourism market will be worth more in 20 years than it costs today. And a much larger group than either of those, statistically, are people who bought an island the way someone else buys a boat. Not because the math works, but because for a few years, they can genuinely afford for it not to step back for a second, because there's a smaller trap hiding inside all of this. Here's the part that breaks people's brains. Across much of the South Pacific, buying an island is really just paying for permission to use it for a fixed number of years, commonly 50 to 99, after which it reverts back to somebody else. The industry calls this a leasehold, as opposed to a freehold where you own the land outright, forever. In Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines, foreigners can't own the underlying land at all, full stop, so ownership gets structured through leases or a local company instead. Either way, you're not buying paradise outright. In a lot of this market, you're renting it for 2 lifetimes, with the fine print quietly reminding you how the story ends. There's one group of owners who actually make the math work, and every one of them did the same thing. They stopped treating the island like a home and started running it like a hotel. Take Richard Branson. In 1979, he bought a 74-acre island in the British Virgin Islands for a reported $180,000. The asking price had been $6 million. He talked his way down. He then spent roughly $10 million turning it into a working resort. That island, Necker Island, now rents for $118,500 a night as an exclusive buyout for up to 54 guests, or from $5,400 a night per room if you're not taking over the whole place. Booked even moderately well, that single island can generate more in a good month than most owners spend maintaining theirs in a decade. But renting out a private island is still, underneath the palm trees, a hospitality business with a hospitality business's fixed costs and a hospitality business's exposure to disaster. Necker Island has been destroyed in the literal sense of that word twice. In 2011, lightning during a tropical storm burned the entire great house to the ground, while Branson and 20 guests, including Kate Winslet, sheltered as it happened. It was rebuilt. In 2017, Hurricane Irma, a Category 5, tore through the British Virgin Islands and left the main house uninhabitable, in Branson's own words, forcing him and his staff into a concrete wine cellar to survive the night. It was rebuilt again, this time with 1,200 solar panels and 3 wind turbines built closer to hurricane code than before. Twice, one storm took the entire asset offline for over a year with zero revenue coming in and a multi-million-dollar repair bill going out. That's the actual trade you're making the day you turn an island into a business instead of a retreat. You've built a hotel that the weather is allowed to shut down whenever it wants with no notice at all. There's one version of this business that has genuinely figured it out, and it isn't owned by a person at all. Royal Caribbean spent between $250 million and $450 million transforming a stretch of Bahamian beach into Perfect Day at Coco Cay, a private island that shows up on the cruise itinerary as a port of call, except every dollar spent there flows straight back to Royal Caribbean. No local restaurants competing for the business, no independent tour operators cutting into the margin. Water park access alone runs $74 to $189 per person per day, and a cabana rents for over $1,000. The island is projected to bring in more than $600 million in 2026. Disney's version, Castaway Cay, has paid its parent company over $220 million in dividends over the past decade. The difference between these islands and the ones billionaires buy for themselves isn't the sand or the water. It's the customer. Royal Caribbean doesn't need a marketing budget to fill its island. It already owns thousands of captive guests a week, delivered by its own ships, with nowhere else to spend their money and only a few hours to spend it in. A billionaire's private island has to hope someone books it. A cruise line's private island gets its customers dropped off at the front door, whether they were looking for the island or not. That's the only version of private island in this entire market that behaves like a real, repeatable business. Time to pull it all together and answer the actual question. How much does this cost you or make you depending on which island you end up owning? Scenario 1, the entry-level buyer. You pick up that $75,000 undeveloped island in Nicaragua. Development to make it livable. Solar, water, a dock, a modest structure brings your all-in cost to roughly $150,000. Annual upkeep runs another $85,000 to $150,000 a year. You never rent it out. 5 years in, you've spent somewhere between $500,000 and $850,000 to own a piece of land you visit a handful of weeks a year. Not a bad deal for what it is. Just not an investment. It's a vacation home with worse internet and no neighbors to complain to. Scenario 2, the Necker Island Path. You build a genuine luxury retreat for tens of millions of dollars and you rent it out at $118,500 a night for even 60 nights of bookings a year. That's over $7 million in gross revenue against maybe $2 million to $4 million in staffing, maintenance, and insurance in a normal year. Spread a $10 million build across 10 years and the property needs roughly $1 million a year in profit just to pay back the construction before it's made anyone a cent. Genuinely, seriously profitable right up until the year a hurricane makes direct landfall on your only asset, and you spend 7 figures rebuilding a house that generated zero income for over a year. Scenario 3, the Ellison Path, where you're not buying an island at all, you're buying a local economy. $300 million buys you 98% of a Hawaiian island, 2 resorts that were already generating revenue, and a captive population that now works for you, whether they wanted a new landlord or not. This only works at billionaire scale, and it only works because the businesses on the island were already profitable before you signed anything. You didn't buy a paradise, you bought an operating company that happens to have a beach. The house always wins in a casino because the odds are fixed in advance. A private island runs the opposite way. The odds are fixed against you, and the only owners who come out ahead are the ones who never planned on keeping the paradise for themselves. Branson's island has burned down once and been leveled by a hurricane once, and he rebuilt it both times. That's the real cost of owning a private island, not the number on the listing, the willingness to pay for the same paradise twice.